Okay, so I thought I'd just change the scenery up a bit. This is the river from behind my place. Water's still running even in the heat of summer, but I thought I would title this video how not to buy an Akiya or abandoned house in Japan. And the reason I put out this video is I receive a lot of calls at my business, people wanting to move to Japan and getting properties, and I see a lot of YouTubers putting out Akiya videos with absolutely the worst possible advice that they could give anybody. And the number one thing is looking at Akiya banks. Now, Akiya banks are the listings usually with a government agency of empty properties, and people can have a look at these on the internet from anywhere in the world. Now, the reason why Akiya bank properties are the worst place to look is because of Japanese culture. Now, people growing up in their hometowns, in strong communities and good areas to live, still have connections with friends and neighbors and everybody around them. And they wouldn't list their properties, sell their properties on Akiya banks because they don't want the potential for their neighbors and friends of where they grew up to have a problem neighbor. And they wouldn't want to do this to people that they grew up with and who they respect. So they would not list their unwanted properties on Akiya banks because they have no control over the type of person who will buy that property and whether they'd be a good fit for the people in the area where they grew up. So a lot of the nice places to live and all the nice abandoned Akiyas or unwanted Akiyas, abandoned houses, are not listed anywhere at all. It's the same situation if they were to list it with a real estate. They have no control over who buys it. So Akiya banks have 1% of all the abandoned house listings in Japan, and these are almost entirely from people who don't care who buys them, because either the place, the location where it is has died, the town's died, is dying, and or will die, or the worst possible scenario is they don't care who moves in that place and nobody else cares who moves into that place. So it's not an optimum place to buy your house from. So you have to look at it from the Japanese perspective, and if you're looking at places on Akiya banks, you have to ask yourself, well, how did that get there? Why doesn't the owner care who buys it? So it's a reflection of a bigger picture. So to give people advice to come over, move to Japan, spend their money, buy places on Akiya banks, you could be giving them the absolute worst, horrible advice possible. They could end up with a place where they're not going to be very happy once they realize exactly the situation everywhere. So my advice is to totally stay away from Akiya banks. Don't touch them. Of course, there's always a chance that there is a gem listed there, but for the reasons I just told you, it's a very small chance that you're going to pick up a gem in a great place to live. Now, on the contrary, if you are a sort of a hermit type person, you're not really bothered being part of the community and part of Japanese life, I would definitely buy from the Akiya bank, because the chances are higher that you are going to be living in a place where sort of people will leave you alone and don't really care who lives there. So for those type of people, yes, I think that's good advice. But for people who come to Japan, want to sort of mix in with the culture and have a sense of community, that's an absolute horrible suggestion to give to somebody to go on Akiya banks. And it's rooted in fact. I mean, you can speak to any Japanese person and they will tell you that it's rude to place burdens on your neighbors and people around you, and that's exactly what selling your place at an Akiya bank would do, or could potentially do. So totally stay away from Akiya banks. Of course, they're a good resource to have a look at sort of value, you know, the type of houses that are available, you know, land and general information. But before taking the plunge and buying one, you really need to do your homework. And the only way to do your homework is to get out and meet people. Now, in Japan, the people moving out of Tokyo, they do it this way. Tokyo, Osaka, Nara, the more bigger cities that come up here to Nagano looking for a rural property, a nice property fairly close to the city, is that they do voluntary work for 2 weeks. They go out with farmers and they do a couple of weeks work for them. They get a chance to meet everybody, see if they would fit in, feel each other out. Is this a place I want to live? And they sort of read the air, as they say in Japan. And some people will end up buying, and some people would say, well, there's no way I could live here. And that's a wise decision, because it's done with information firsthand. So I would totally stay away from Akiya banks. I wouldn't buy anything until you have a feel for the area where you want to live, have a feel for the people. Now, if you have a look at the Akiya that I bought, that was not listed in an Akiya bank. The person who owned my house beforehand, she has 4 or 5 family members that live in the vicinity. And when I spoke with her sister, that was one of the reasons why they didn't list. I know this is firsthand, is that they want to have an idea, or at least have a feel about the person that's moving in. And I spoke with my contact that I got through the council, and we were back and forth for a couple of months. And he was feeling me out and getting information on me, the type of person I am, type of person my wife is. And over time, I also said I wanted to do a business here and things like this. So he sort of knew that this place that I bought would suit me, and my personality, my wife's personality would be a good fit. So if he didn't like us, or he had some doubts, there's absolutely zero possibility I would have been offered this house to buy. So if it's happened to me, I know that there's 10 million apparently empty houses in Japan, and the best ones won't be offered to you just by getting on your computer in America or in Australia or the UK. It's just not going to happen. So as always, if you want something, you want to have a bit of luck, you have to give yourself a chance. And if you're just going to get on websites, you're only going to come to Japan for a couple of days because you're busy at work just to buy something, well, you know, you're going to end up most likely with a dud. And even if it's a great price and the house looks really good, once that charm wears off, you're going to regret it. This is my experience. I've seen people buy houses like this and they've just really run into trouble later on. They don't like where they live. They don't actually spend much time at the place they bought. All their plans have changed and they've gone and rented an apartment in the city because, you know, the idea and everything's just worn off on them. But if they went about it the other way, who knows what could have happened, you know? They could have really found what would have suited them. So you have to spend the time, as in the case of the girl that come to my cafe today who's up for 2 weeks. If she wanted to live here and the locals really liked her, she'd be offered to buy a really nice place. If they didn't like her, you know, they just wouldn't provide the information. So you really need to put in a little bit of effort if you want a good result. So anyway, I thought I'd come down the river, just a little bit of a different aspect. So anyway, this is just my thoughts on buying Akiyas, and it's all rooted in the culture here. You know, if you understand the culture, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Anyway, as always, hope you like the video.